I never imagined my haven becoming a battlefield of lies while I was entangled in a complex web of lies. The woman who captured my heart, Letty, had secrets entangled with Teague, another man. The threads of our lives were woven together by an apparently innocent wager that put my love inadvertently at risk. Now that everything is coming together, my goal is vengeance rather than just the truth. This is my story, watch it come to pass. Letty, my darling wife, sat cooped up in the kitchen, her feelings reflecting mine. I felt guilty about securing her. Her desperate attempt to break free prompted an overreaction on my part. Now that the keys are securely hidden, she cannot access them for the time being. I am comforted by my decision, even though it is heavy. Tears mar her once perfect makeup, and as she stands by the sink, a vomit stain detracts from the elegance of her black dress. There was a lingering smell of alcohol and bile when Letty saw that I had returned early. She was visibly shocked and distressed and quickly sought cover in the bathroom where she passed out from nausea. It was a depressing scene. Seeing my wife wretch, her lunch now a victim of her distress, made my heart sink. It was reported that she had left for a trade show in Atlanta that morning and wouldn't be back until late Sunday night. At 7 a.m., she said goodbye to me and started the journey to Atlanta, which was supposed to take 4 hours. Outside my store, a semi-trailer that was attempting a fast turn struck an electricity pole and toppled it. A power outage was the outcome of this. There are no windows in my cinder block gun shop on purpose, and that day was really hot. My employees were yelling for hazard pay for an hour while we were all sweating in the dark. It was obvious that they were half joking. Hello, darling. I arrived in Atlanta at the same hotel where I had previously been. I share a room with one of the girls enrolled under her name. I'm currently in the convention center. We're getting the stand in order. We open at 2 p.m. After that, do not call me. I won't be able to respond. I'll contact you every evening when I'm free to go to supper. Oops, time to go, sweetheart, Letty said, inwardly, while we were still waiting for the co-op's electrician crew. A group of workers from Electric Cooperative arrived a few minutes later. Not long after, the crew chief stopped by my store to let me know that the wrong size pole had been delivered and that it would take an additional 3 hours to get the power back. I gave everyone Friday off, closed the store, and went straight home, dreaming of a long, refreshing shower. You can imagine how shocked I was to see Leigh standing next to the bed when I entered the bedroom. She's wearing an expensive lingerie set I bought her at an upscale store on our honeymoon. It came with garters, a dark red satin thong, and a full-cup bra. My wife has worn it only a handful of times since I gave it to her 7 years ago. My wife was pulling her tight little black dress over her breast, covering her head, so she didn't see me walk in. Letty looked unsteady on her feet. I could smell excitement and alcohol because my nose is so sensitive. I noticed there was an open bottle of Chardonnay on the dresser behind her. Next to it, in a small pool of spilled wine, stood a glass with 1 or 2 sips left in it. I figured there was still 1 glass in the wine for the spirits bottle. This implied that she drank 3 glasses or more, which was more than she should have. She smells like warm peach pie straight out of the oven, and she definitely gets excited when Letty does. My nostrils were attacked by the scent. I knew at once that my wife was wearing her clothes, horny, and tipsy. The idea of an amazing evening excited me instantly, but it lasted only a moment before I realized Letty was supposed to be in Atlanta at this very moment. It did not take me long to realize that she was getting ready to dress for someone else, someone in the area. Her response to me when her dress lowered to reveal her face was priceless. My young wife apologized and cleared her throat. Then she began to cough and ran to the bathroom, ruling out the possibility that she had prepared a special surprise for me after witnessing Letty throw up most of the bottle of Chardonnay and the rest of her lunch. Her elegant shape in a tight dress as she puked was so beautiful that I couldn't take my eyes off of it, even as my universe fell apart and my heart fell apart. Her form is very attractive. Bowden Teague must have thought her figure attractive. Director of frostbitten marketing for the company is Teague. Letty is employed by a manufacturer of auto parts. A trade show exhibit gets 5 times more traffic and orders when a few attractive women in tight blouses and nice jeans stop by. That's how Letty came into his view a few years ago. Teague called the women she drove a van full of for an exhibition booth, where they performed intimate dances, booth candy. When the legal and human resources departments of the company learned about this, there was a similar explosion to the one in Grand Theft Auto 5's breakdown movie. Teague is treated shamefully well by every parts owner, Mr. Cup, but even he cannot overlook such a transgression. Mr. Cup now demands that Teague only staff the stand with full-time employees. Consequently, Teague selects candies for the booth from the pool of available office workers. He invites Leigh and 6 other attractive but slender women to staff the display stand. He and Mr. Cope came to an agreement whereby he would call his recruits volunteers and pay them $1,000 in cash for each day they worked. At her primary job, where she gets paid $1,000 a day in tax-free cash for talking to people, no one will ever complain to management about wearing a tight blouse. Letty works as an accountant, and she does it very well. The irony is that she had to work for almost a month in the office to earn the same amount of money as she did over the course of one weekend at the show, a compelling illustration of supply and demand. Letty had to work, which I detested, but we were dependent on her income to get by. When my father P.A. passed away last year, he was a prosperous man. P.A. insisted that his kids understand the value of a dollar and detested trust money. He came to the conclusion that his children should all launch their own companies and rely only on their profits until they turned 30, at which point they would be entitled to their share of the family trust. A few years older than me, but still up to the challenge, my brother and sister assured me that the experience would be worthwhile. They committed to continuing this practice with the youngest of P.A.'s children. I still had 2 years left. Letty's pay and what I could bring in from my gun business were our only sources of income. I understand that calling it my gun store sounds profitable. This is untrue in Georgia's rural areas. The store was owned by my Uncle Kevin, and it was more of a pastime than a successful enterprise. Uncle Kevin loved to hunt, and the business gave him the opportunity to talk with some of the best hunters in our part of the state. Uncle Kevin passed away a few months before I received my Georgia Tech degree, so I assumed ownership of the store rather than having to start from scratch like my brother and sister had to. I was offered the opportunity to run a store in Pennsylvania. One advantage was that I avoided having to launch a new business during a recession when credit was almost non-existent. One drawback was the restricted potential for growth. I had owned the store for 7 years and was the world's leading authority on restricted development potential when Letty puked on our bathroom floor. The fact that none of my 5 employees missed a single paycheck due to the unpredictability of CO and the weak economy made me very happy. And I knew I could increase the store's profitability with a few capital improvements. However, I was denied a loan. I lacked enough collateral to offset the risk. Moreover, financing the sale of firearms carries a special risk for credit institutions. Since Leigh was the only company in the area big enough to need a full-time accountant, it was hired at every level. Leigh has therefore invested very little in her credentials. We barely make ends meet with Letty's pay and what I bring home from the store. When life threw us curveballs, like a broken water heater or a faulty starter in my pickup, we had nothing to complain about because, in all honesty, we were outperforming many in the neighborhood. Like everyone else, we tighten our belts and get by with less. Our quality of life has greatly improved with cash payments at shows. She never turned down an offer from Bowden Teague to work at an exhibition. Letty and I needed 10 minutes to clean up her puke. We worked in silence, neither of us speaking. Letty was dressing for a different man at home, and she didn't want to explain why. I didn't think I could keep my temper in check. Usually, I don't get angry easily or lose my cool easily, but occasionally, I do get upset. I have trouble controlling myself sometimes, and this is one of those days. I've discovered that controlling yourself after you've lost your temper is much harder than managing to keep your cool in the first place. It's been a few years in the making. I wanted us to go into the living room and have a quiet conversation about everything after we were done cleaning. Letty explained that she would be late and that she had to get out. She can be very stubborn, so when I asked where she needed to go, she jetted her jaw and closed her mouth. She said she had to use the restroom after 15 minutes of progressively harsher questions, to which she refused to respond. I saw her attempting to smuggle a clean outfit on a hanger out of the garage 2 minutes later. When I noticed her, she was almost out the door. Here's where I lost it. It took me a few minutes to stop her and get her settled into a chair. My voice was raspy from yelling. The only bright spot was that I had her full attention at last. She was afraid of becoming the object of my wrath after witnessing me lose it. Physically, she was secure. Letty had no idea that I scared her and treated her like a first-class victim, even though my rage was rarely violent. The good news is that she realized she needed to talk as soon as she sat in the room because she wasn't going anywhere. "So where are you going?" I asked. "It shouldn't be some dubious Atlanta fake trade show." She started crying. Afterwards, I inquired, of all people, "Did you pick Bowden Teague? This man is a pig, and you truly despised him?" "Yes, I loathe him. I'm unable to tolerate him." I was aware of its veracity. Let Teague's marketing team handle his accounting needs. She needed to talk to him once a week. She didn't like the way he treated the other women in the office, even though he was kind to her. When one of the directors of the inventory department reported his harassment to human resources, she practically danced with happiness. By no means was this the first instance of harassment. "Teague, you should have been fired," but Mr. Cope believed he was a marketing genius. Nevertheless, Teague was given a probationary period by Mr. Cope. When his wife realized this, it was the last straw for her, and she left him, taking their 2 small children with her. I questioned, "If you couldn't stand him, why did you go to his place?" "I was heading to a motel, not his house." Simply answer the darn question, Letty. "I lost my bet money." "Sure bet." "I bet him that Georgia would defeat Clemson last week." "Clemson won the game." Technically, Clemson not only won the game, but they also outscored the spread by more than 2 touchdowns. This was not surprising, given that Georgia was rebuilding. Before Clemson, they lost 5 games and were far worse than Georgia. The story was now beginning to make sense. Letty has 4 older brothers. All 5 siblings were born within a year of each other, and having 4 older brothers as rivals shaped her into the most spectacular super-competitive trash talker I've ever seen. Her full name is Violet, although she looks nothing like her. She could seize a man's face in the blink of an eye. The more she despises someone, the more derogatory things she says. So, the family began calling her Letty. "What were the stakes, Letty?" she sniffles before talking about the trip to the British Virgin Islands. As a Georgia alumna, she enjoys brag-worthy moments and appears to wager on her beloved Bulldogs. This is a perilous activity for someone with only a passing interest in sports. The bet was that if he won, he would have me for the entire weekend. 10 days at an all-inclusive resort, including a supper cruise on a sailboat. Bowden brings his wife and kids there every year. I'd get your and my tickets in February. The stakes were really high for us, that is if you win. Will he get you this weekend? What does this mean? I knew exactly what that meant, but I wanted her to say it herself. Andy, this means I'll be available. What exactly does he have at his disposal, Letty? Prepare. Clean the toilets and paint the house. She spoke quietly as she looked down and away from myself. In response, she nodded and said, "Do whatever he wants in the bedroom." "Are you discussing sex?" she asked. I took 3 deep breaths and said, "Yes, Andy. I mean, sex." Then, in the softest voice imaginable, I asked, "Letty, don't you think you should have started this with sex?" "I am ashamed, Andy." She started crying once more. She really didn't want to answer this question, so I cut her off before she could say anything more and said, "Let's go back a little earlier. You mentioned original bets. What does this mean?" I began to let go and lose control of myself once more. Let's see how angry I get. She started talking right away. I had to do what I had previously said, but I also had to agree. We chose the double or zero route. If I win, he will still provide first-class travel for 2 people and $2,000 in cash. She found it extremely difficult to say this. He teases me about being Miss Goody-Goody and says he wants to see me laid back with my hair down. Agree to consume numerous forbidden substances on a daily basis for his sake. I didn't want to ask this question, but I had to. Prohibited substances? Are you joking? He guaranteed that by Sunday afternoon, I'd be sober as a glass. Letty's heaviest illicit substance was a margarita on the rocks, which she consumed occasionally. She said, She had won a trip to the British Virgin Islands and had then added more money to cover more travel and other costs. Who won the first bet that brought you to the double or zero game? She was asked. Despite the high stakes and the Bulldogs' current slump, she went with them. I put my palm over my face and went out onto the terrace that is located behind our house. Letty gambled her virtue once, then bet it all again. It was really challenging to finish this. It took me a few minutes to get back to normal conversation while strolling in the refreshing evening breeze. I announced, I'm returning home. You aren't going anywhere. The bet has been canceled. I own your body, and you own mine. You cannot wager on something that does not belong to you, just like I can't gamble on my Uncle Kevin's farm. Andy, I do not speak Welsh. He has tried to speak Welsh several times, and I always call him out in front of his department for it. I burned and humiliated him. He will do the same with me. How many times have you argued thus far, Letty? 24 in the last 2 years. I've won 24 times in a row. She was ridiculously proud of it, mentioning some of the bets. They were all predicated on the idea that the top 20 teams would triumph over the bottom teams. I explained that before last week's bet, Bowden had always chosen the team from the cellar. Then, you lost your 25th bet. What was at issue was your devotion to me and your use of illegal narcotics. All this time, you hadn't considered whether you were being set up. Why did this happen? This loser is such a poor gambler that he had never won against me until last week. Lay, you were set up. Until recently, every team he bet on was a sure loser. He lost purposefully. I was proud of how calmly I stated this and then asked, what happened in the prior 24 bets? She answered, the typical rate was a Target gift card worth $120. The last 6 or 7 were $100 Target cards. She loved Target cards and nearly broke our marriage because of them. I emptied out the remaining beer and grabbed some bourbon from the shelf over the refrigerator. I poured it into 2 fingers and added a few ice cubes. While doing so, I responded, after 24 consecutive bets on little amounts that were easily hidden from me, he unexpectedly increased the duration to 10 days at an all-inclusive Caribbean resort. Didn't that scare you? Her eyes grew huge. She certainly did not look at it from another perspective. Bowden stated that after his wife left him, he did not want to go on their yearly trip. He explained that he had already paid for it and that otherwise, the money would be wasted. It made sense for him to make a bet with her. Isn't this a plausible explanation? Teague clearly had led imprisoned under her own vanity and selfishness. The look on her face is comprehensible, at least she had the courtesy to be ashamed. I asked, how much does this vacation cost in monetary terms? Is it enough that his wife wants to recover half of the costs in her divorce proceedings? Her lack of response was revealing. I continued, have you seen the tickets or the booking confirmation? How did you know he had booked the trip when I questioned about it? Lay appeared to be sick, realization dawned, and my wife began to comprehend Teague's strategy. It's time to complete it as PA would have done it. Lay, have you considered what it would be like to spend the weekend agreeing that he could do whatever he wanted with you? Her expression was perplexed. She certainly hadn't considered this. She imagined it would be like one of those intense love novels she enjoyed. She didn't consider what someone like Teague could do. I stated, the terms were whatever he wanted, correct? Yes, Andy said, is there any form of sex you refuse to have? She blushed and gazed at the floor, but she continued to speak. Do you know what it is, and you agreed to a bet that you wouldn't be able to deny him what you usually denied me? What if Bowden decides to do this all weekend? What if he wants to keep you doing this for hours? Did you also agree to this? She looked disgusted, her expression shifted to terror, and she trembled and began to wail loudly. Resign yourself, sweetheart. There's one more thing, you aren't using birth control. We are very cautious about what we do and when do we do it. What if Bowden decides he'd rather not have to use protection? When did your last period end? 2 weeks ago. Aren't you ovulating this weekend? What if he expects you to give birth to his child? You can't add to it. Leigh instantly began vomiting. I delivered the kitchen trash can to her. She leaned over it and screamed repeatedly. However, nothing came out. My wife's look indicated that it was as empty as before. I realized she finally understood everything perfectly. She cried sadly, "What a fool I am, Andy. I did not want this. It never occurred to me that he would or could do that. I was so confident that I would win. I had previously decided what I would take with me. I should not have placed the bet. When I lost, I should have told you. I should have known Welsh. What was I thinking?" She began sobbing. It's hard to believe, but my wife is a very intelligent woman. She is a qualified public accountant who graduated with honors from Georgia. Mr. Cope dubbed Leigh the Enchantress because of her brilliant abilities to remove earnings from his publications. However, she was the youngest and sole girl in a family of 7. Her father is a pastor in a tiny church, and her tall, strong brothers guarded her ferociously. They scared away everyone who did not appreciate Leigh as much as they did. Only a few were brave enough to face this torture. So before she became engaged to me, Leigh lived a quiet life in a little village. She was duped in this manner simply because of her naivety. She had no idea how nasty people could be to one another. When combined with her almost complete lack of creativity about sex, it's understandable that an intelligent woman might find herself in this scenario. It was also her first introduction to high-stakes gambling. We both know she is a thrill seeker. Since we began dating, I have kept her secure from harm, but this time I wasn't present, and she got carried away. Her entire face was covered with snot and tears as she sat in the chair. She couldn't even remove it herself. I gently cleaned her face with a damp kitchen towel. I expected it to calm her down, but it had the opposite effect. Her sobs grew heavier. I pounded the table and said, "Letty, I need you to listen to me right now. Concentrate, please." Letty got herself together again. I continued, "This is immediate divorce nonsense. There are no lies without exaggeration. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Get your divorce immediately. Do you understand? Do you know how close I am to pressing the eject lever right now, especially after I caught you and you still attempted to flee?" Letty nodded. Her mouth was tightly shut to keep from weeping. I said, "I love you with all my heart and do not want to divorce you, but you have to explain all of this to me." When she did not respond, I began hammering her with questions. "Are you tired of me? Did I disappoint you? Are you upset with me? Am I not good enough for you? How could you do this to us?" When I asked these questions, I unconsciously let out a cry of pain. I blamed myself for being taught to never engage in self-pity. No matter how hard I tried, I could not keep it to myself. I was worried my questions would make her cry again, but they really made her feel better. She responded angrily, "No, honey. This is not you at all. You're the best dude I've ever met. I am completely satisfied, Andy, and I want to get married to you. You're the man I need, only you." I paid special attention to her face. She wasn't lying to me, she was stating the truth. This is why it is so difficult for me to comprehend the situation. "This is terrible," I responded. "I hope you are telling the truth. You'll have to do a lot of work to get everything in order before we get engaged." I explained my position on infidelity, only me and everyone. As soon as you do something to another person. First, it's over between us. You understand, right? Letty responded, I feel the same way. If you ever do, my temper surged, and I interrupted her. Whoa, no. Don't say that. Have I ever given you a reason to mistrust my loyalty? My wife shook her head. This incident was a significant failure on your behalf, I continued. I've never had such failures. You and I are not morally equivalent. I've never made moves toward infidelity, but you, if I came home half an hour later, you'd be well on your way to becoming Teague's toy. And if this occurs, the divorce will be unstoppable. I never put you in the situation I am in today. I paused to calm myself down again, noticing that my thoughts were going in circles and that I was beginning to get angry. I pulled myself together and forced myself to move forward. Did anyone witness your bet? I asked. Was anyone else participating in the discussion about this? Letty shook her head. Then he is the only one who knows you're breaking your word. Everyone else will believe he is lying or exaggerating. Even if they know the truth, it wouldn't matter. Nobody expects you to do what he suggests. If saying no makes you feel guilty, you'll have to deal with it. It's better to be a happily married word breaker and live with the consequences than to have an unhappy divorce. Letty sobbed and nodded in agreement. We are completely in accord, I inquired. How did you communicate with Teague? How did you plan this weekend? We spoke at the office, she replied. He tried to write to me on my mobile, but I refused and banned him. He handed me a phone in the office yesterday, but I never used it. Where is he? In my purse. I scooped up her purse from the floor of the closet. It included a cheap prepaid phone. Is he? She nodded. I looked through the phone. There was one SMS sent with the word test. There have been multiple incoming SMS messages in the last hour. Teague wanted to know why she had been gone for so long. Is there anything else you should tell me that we haven't previously discussed? I asked. If I discover later that you are hiding something else, it is over between us. You understand, don't you? She shook her head. This is all, you already know everything, I stated. Then it's fine. Please, can I trust you now? Are you going to try to evade me again? No, she responded with an impulsive change of heart at the last second, accompanied by unexpected bitterness. I am not going away, Andy. You're my dude. I will do everything you say. I am not going anywhere. She unlocked the door while praying silently. She attempted to smother me with kisses. Now I truly did not want to kiss her. The traces of snot and the scent of vomit came from the rage. I was totally out of my head. However, she was persuasive. After a minute of holding my breath, I pushed her away and sent her upstairs to shower and clean our teeth, insisting on no contact with Teague for any reason. We need to prepare, she agreed. As she passed me, I stroked her arm to get her to stop. Letty, I like this pair of underpants on you. Please do me a favor and take a selfie in front of the bathroom mirror with this ensemble. Will you do that for me? She smiled and nodded as she showered and prepared. I went to Lonnie's Cookout, which was half a mile from my place. I grabbed a few platters to go fried chicken and pork with a variety of sides. This was our favorite dish. It was still early for dinner, but I figured food might help. While I was waiting, my phone rang. Letty texted me a selfie. She had straightened her hair into a ponytail, tidied up her face, and applied cosmetics exactly how I like it. She knows just how to press my buttons. The photograph stole my breath away. The realization of how close we had come to disaster that evening struck me with barely restrained wrath. For this, I demanded my pound of flesh from Teague, and he considered how to get it without going to prison. Then I realized that if I involved Letty's brothers in this problem, I would most likely not have to do anything. While we were eating, I told Letty, I understand how sensitive you are to your brother's teasing. I will do my best to keep this little incident between us. Neither my family nor yours should be aware of this. Her expression conveyed her deep gratitude to me. But you and I both agree that something must be done about Bowden Teague. What he did constituted significant predation. If we do nothing, he will begin looking for someone else, someone who lacks our resources and is unable to defend themselves. We must be responsible. There must be adults in this room. She nodded and stated, I want him to face justice for what he did. I asked, what does justice mean to you? I don't believe he broke any laws with what he did to you. Let us examine what he did to entice you to sleep with him. It was horrible, but not unlawful. She remained silent for a while before I added, we do have something we can work with though. Now he's in a hotel room with illegal stuff. This is illegal and may lead to his arrest. To accomplish something like this, we'll have to get Vicky or Little Joe engaged. She groaned in fear. I said, well, Little Joe isn't afraid to break the rules, and VK will always follow the rules. I would prefer to use VK because he is more likely to keep his mouth shut, plus he's been asking me to borrow PA's antique ski boat for a while now so he can take in and split on inflatable cheesecake rides. With this, I can try to buy his silence. Little Joe has guaranteed results. He will stop Bowden regardless of the cost. I'll let you decide. She gathered her courage and said, better than VK. I also do not trust Little Joe to keep his mouth shut. I called VK. He responded on the first ring. Andy, how are you and my gorgeous sister doing? I responded, not very good, VK. Are you on duty today? No, fine, he said. I'll need a large favor from you for this. I will be very grateful to you. An SUV from the sheriff's department arrived 20 minutes later. VK had abandoned his older brother. The scariest of the four VSS. VK is the county's top deputy sheriff. There are a lot of accountable parties in our state. Sheriffs are elected officials who may not have prior law enforcement expertise. The chief deputy sheriff is the highest-ranking law enforcement officer, the one who knows how to get the job done and operate the department, whereas the sheriff handles political matters and interacts with the commissioner and the public. S is our county's chief deputy sheriff, and he does a fantastic job. Unlike his predecessor, he commanded the respect of minority communities. Old city people anticipate that when the current sheriff retires, VK will become the county's sheriff for the next 20 years. I informed VK about what had occurred to Leigh and Bowden, went to save her from shame. I explained everything. VK was initially amused by his sister's lack of discernment. Did you bet double or zero on Georgia's triumph over Clemson this year? Damn that, no way, this is absolute foolishness, VK exclaimed. But as I went on to describe the setup and illegal substances, his happy demeanor dwindled. He became progressively furious. When VK becomes furious, he does not lose his cool as I do. His lips are firmly squeezed together, and his eyes are glittering. That's what makes him so dangerous. I added, now this guy is in the garden of room 223, he should carry illegal substances with him. Is it possible to examine his room on some pretext? Perhaps you could engage a K-9 service to find him. VK stated that he had a few ideas and walked outside to his SUV to make some private phone calls. He returned with a smile and announced good news. An unidentified customer contacted 911 from the Garden Inn's house phone. He stated that he overheard a man in room 223 of the Garden purchasing illegal narcotics from a dealer. If the door is open when my people arrive, we'll have everything we need to conduct a legal search, I said. Letty inquired, can't you pretend you're going there and ask him to keep the door open for you? For the past hour, Bowden Teague has been calling the hotline every several minutes, leaving voicemail. I handed her the phone and spoke directly to him. Assume you're in the parking lot, but you're concerned about being spotted. Stand in the lobby waiting for the doors to open. Ask him to keep it open so you may enter straight away. She typed and sent an SMS. Teague did not respond to the request, but did write in response, where have you gone so far? Her phone suddenly rang. I told her not to respond. If he starts speaking to him, he'll probably give us away. Write him an answer. Say I arrived suddenly, and it took you a while to leave me. Teague responded, "If you want the door to stay open, you must be interested in me." Letty asked, "What shall I do?" I had an epiphany on my cell phone. I responded with a selfie of Letty wearing lingerie in the bathroom mirror, precisely cropped so that he could see from the top of her bra to the top of her stockings, and sent it to Lenny's phone over Bluetooth. He then asked Letty to send him an SMS. The close-up of her underpants was exposing but not recognizable. This photograph caused the man to lose his wits. Bowden's reaction was instantaneous. He sent a response SMS, "Best weekend ever." A second later, Teague shared an image from inside a hotel room with the door wide open. VK made a phone call to get things started before sitting down with me in the living room. I used a pretense to send Letty upstairs for a few minutes. When she went, I implored VK to be kinder to Letty. "I realize I already owe you a lot of money for this, but Letty is extremely sensitive to deception. She is a bright woman, yet she is gullible and easily duped. I know you really wanted to take the yacht I got from my father. If you keep it between the three of us, I'll give you one weekend every month for the rest of the year. You get to choose which ones, and I'll even keep them tucked in for you." VK laughed and told Andy, "You don't owe me anything. You acted to defend my sister. I expected this from you, otherwise, I would not have allowed you to date her. However, I am thankful to you. What you have asked me to do is literally my job. Catching him is the least I can do when it comes to maintaining secrets. I adore little Joe, but you know how his tongue hangs out on both ends. If he discovered what had happened to Letty, the entire neighborhood would know before noon the following day. He will not allow her to endure this, and that is a fact. Consider me to be sensible and prudent." I agreed and apologized for any possible negative outcomes. He grinned and spoke, "I still want to borrow your boat. Your father's old ski boat will suffice for one time. It would be lovely in June when school finishes, and I can take the kids on a weekday gasoline trip at my expense." We shook hands as they waited. Letty came down to visit her brother. Letty desperately wanted to have children. We decided to postpone this until we had access to the trust. My sister looked forward to it, but my brother did not. Both encouraged us to wait. Letty liked parenting while caring for our numerous nephews. She interrogated VK relentlessly about what was going on with his children. N and Rascal are her favorite nephews. At the end, VK called. He laughed at a few points but said nothing noteworthy. After a few minutes of listening, VK replied, "Okay, Darnell, great job. Thank Carlos on my behalf as well." He then informed us that Bowden Teague had been detained at the garden in just a few minutes earlier on accusations of possessing a controlled drug with intent to distribute. Finally, they were found on him. He had a big amount, empty bags, and scales. This signifies the intention to disseminate. He will almost certainly face prison time for this. Letty, you should avoid dealing with unlawful substances. They are not only extremely addictive, but they also reduce sexual inhibition. I did my best to keep myself under control. Letty moved her palm gently down my back. VK continued, "The probable reason for the anonymous tip was not particularly strong, but Bowden gave himself away. He was smoking in his chamber when the sheriff came by. Deputies stepped inside after smelling smoke and finding the door open. Teague attempted to shove them out. During the scuffle, he dumped a bag containing illegal narcotics in the corridor in front of 4 witnesses, including the hotel manager and the on-duty repairman. Following this, he became hostile and resisted the aid required to restrain him. Darnell Bips was the officer that arrested the suspect. He was the one who had done it. Do you know Darnell? He is a regular customer in my store." I nodded. Letty shook her head negatively as VK proceeded. Bowden was 2 years ahead of me in school, and his father was a state legislator at the time he started college 4 years before you began high school. So you didn't know him from high school. He bullied kids. Darnell was eventually able to exact his retribution 15 years later. Darnell agreed to treat my wife and me to a steak meal in exchange for sending him on this quest. We had a nice laugh over that. Darnell's father was a diesel mechanic who worked for Pennsylvania. He moved between dealerships based on the type of repair work required. The Darnells were decent people. PA taught me to respect excellent people. I was relieved he got his retribution. Letty asked, "And what happens to Bowden?" VK responded, "Do you know Laney Wilcox? He is the district attorney, yet he is ruthless when it comes to illegal narcotics. Intent to distribute carries a required sentence. If I am not mistaken, he will make an example of Mr. Teague." He then stared at Letty. Darnell was able to seize Teague's cell phone. "Is there anything about this phone that you would feel embarrassed about? Texts, emails, phone calls, or photographs?" Letty responded, "Just the photo we just sent. From the past 2 years, we phoned each other a few times while at trade to negotiate work schedules. That's all. I want this photo to disappear." VK responded, "Already taken care of. When the scene is cleared, Teague's phone is discovered broken and reported damaged during the incident. You owe Darnell for this." Darnell would buy a couple boxes of 9mm ammo from me every month, then a pallet of 12-gauge shells at the end of the summer. He had a checking account and made monthly payments throughout the year. I mentally noted that this year's payment would be at the expense of the establishment. In addition, he would go to the store around once a month to look for a good price on a rifle for his eldest son. A few days ago, I swapped in a good condition Remington 870 Wingmaster. "I'll give him a really decent bargain on Darnell." "I'll take care of everything," I said, leaving everything as is. VK nodded, indicating comprehension. Letty questioned him, "What if Bowden claims he was in the room waiting for me?" Bowden responded, "He will not say he was detained for possessing controlled narcotics. He is intelligent enough to recognize that no one will trust him. Second, your phone is the only way you can be traced. His cell phone is shattered. If he complains about his broken phone, we will obtain a warrant to investigate internet backups and he will bury himself." Darnell examined his phone and discovered that the most recent text messages were from Teague's dealer. There is a record of the incriminating transactions. Teague is unlikely to say something that draws attention to the phone. There is no indication that you ever possessed this phone. "I'll take it and it will go," Letty asked. "Can't you trace the phone to this house?" VK responded, "A determined investigator can collect records from the cell phone carrier and triangulate the device. In a big metropolis, it is likely that it can be tracked within a 1/2 to 1 mile radius. The countryside has far fewer towers. The search can only be reduced to an 8-mile radius. There are 100 dwellings within an 8-mile radius of here, so the answer isn't as straightforward. If everything else fails, I shall take leadership of the probe." Vic looked at us both and said, "There's one more thing you should know." When they examined the room, they discovered some high-end filming equipment. These cameras are undetectable but offer great resolution. One of them was on the curtain rod, the other was placed on the chest of drawers. The assistants would have missed them if they hadn't been looking for them. When the assistants entered the room, both were already working. He possessed illegal chemical and blackmail cameras. I need to sketch you an image of how you were framed. Do not worry about yourself, Letty. Your husband's family is reputed to be wealthy. Perhaps he was the intended target, not you. What might Teague do to Andy? Her face became white as she realized you were carrying damning materials to blackmail her. She didn't respond. There's nothing to say, fine. You nearly escaped a bullet because VK requested to speak with Letty alone. I stepped out into the hallway and gave them the room. I glanced at them while he whispered to her. While he was doing it, Letty gazed into my eyes and started crying again. That was too much for me. I turned aside. When VK was about to go, I thanked him warmly, but he dismissed it as trivial. Here, families look after one another. Later that evening, I asked Letty what VK had told her. He warned that if I ever did to you what our mother did to us, I should pack my belongings and leave the district. Otherwise, he will chastise me and make me scream out in grief. That terrified me to death, and I've never seen my brother so angry. This refers to the fact that his mother, Loretta, fled from her husband while Letty and her brothers were children. This man turned out to be a lawyer. When I was younger, my father had many modest car businesses in South Georgia. He had a complete team of lawyers working for him from the Augusta Partnership. One of the lawyers went there every week to talk with Pa about current cases. During each of these journeys, the lawyer stopped for lunch at the restaurant where Loretta worked as a server. She had to work there to support her family. His family was quite respectable, however, poor country preachers such as Lay and Father were never wealthy. Loretta was both beautiful and a lawyer. Pa liked her. She battled in life with her fate. The lawyer was a gorgeous man with good conversation skills. He gradually captivated Loretta, eventually persuading her to abandon her family for him. He promised her a comfortable and opulent life in the major city of Augusta. He also mentioned that in a year or two, the children would be able to move in with them. Loretta's decision to flee with him was made simple by this. His father, Roy, was stunned by the incident and lost his position in the church as a result of the controversy. Pa was infuriated. The lawyer was his employee whom he brought to the city and held personally responsible. Pa promptly fired the lawyer the day Roy's church deacons begged him to resign. My father hired him as the sales manager for his Ford and Lincoln dealerships. This represented a huge boost in compensation when compared to the salary of a preacher. Pa attempted to support Roy and issue a statement to the community. It worked, but with an unforeseen result. It was the best business choice Pa has ever made. Roy had a reputation for honesty and respect, and he sold numerous cars to the underprivileged. Under Roy's direction, the Ford dealership became the foundation of Pan's corporate empire. Over the next 2 years, Pennsylvania and Roy became close friends. A nasty businessman who everyone fears and a discredited preacher. Roy was loved by everyone, but he could not cook, and his children believed he could set fire to water. Moore was troubled by the prospect of his 5 growing children eating frozen dinners every night. So, the Roys were regulars at Sunday supper. Moore followed tradition and spent time with Letty so she could learn to cook. Let the lone girl yearned and wanted her mother's care and attention. She and Ma shared the same sense of humor and could laugh at each other for hours every Sunday afternoon. Letty and Moore would spend hours cooking and joking. I realized I'd fallen in love with Letty while sitting at our kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon. I'm watching her gently knead the cookie dough. The tip of her nose was stained with flour. She remarked something pleasantly, which made my mother laugh so hard that she couldn't stand still. Letty looked at me, winked, and smiled as if to say, "Isn't your mother wonderful?" At that point, my heart began to race in my chest. I felt giddy and light as air. I was 15, and Letty was 14. She developed early and was the most stunning thing I'd ever seen. I can still remember exactly how I felt at that time. It was the greatest sensation in the world. VK was the first to detect my feelings for Letty. Shortly after that Sunday, he pulled me aside to talk. VK was 4 years older than me, standing 15 centimeters and 36 kilos taller. He said, "I know you are in love with Letty, Andy. It's written all over your face. My sister, despite her efforts to hide it, has the same deep sentiments for you as you do for her. I'm offering you a deal. If you respect her, I will interfere in my father's and brother's affairs to keep them away from you. I am an excellent judge of people, and I believe you will look after her. This is what I expected. You will care for her. Don't disappoint me, Andy." Then it appeared to me that he was exceedingly generous. Years later, I knew VK was willing to go to any length for me. My parents took it upon themselves to lead their family with decency and respect. PA and Ma assisted them when they needed it the most. VK was quite intelligent and knew what this meant for his family. PA was a vindictive man. Months after the lawyer was fired, he was still enraged, and he would go to any length to make the lawyer regret his choice to urge Loretta to run away with him. PA hired the top investigators in the state. Investigators gathered a plethora of damaging evidence against the lawyer and used it to slowly grind him to dust. In 3 months, the lawyer lost multiple cases, a partnership, a license, a fortune, and a house. Finally, Loretta PA simply spilled the correct dirt to the right person at the right time. When Roy found out what had happened to the lawyer, he went by our house. He told PA that the administration of justice brings gladness to the upright, but fear to those who do wrong. Proverbs 21 verse 15. It's encouraging to know that I have people who the Lord is using to bring about justice. PA dismissed it as nothing. Families here take care of one another. VK paid me a visit on my day off a few months after Teague's arrest. He claimed there was an incident at Glenville State Prison and that Bowden Teague had died. I asked VK what had happened. He claimed that after Teague was consigned to the minimum punishment, the state transferred him to Glenville. During the first week of his captivity, Teague was killed. It could have been any of hundreds of witnesses, but no one said anything. He stated that the warden contacted the sheriff to see whether anyone in the region held a vendetta against Teague. The chief informed the sheriff that there were allegations in the prison that several years ago Teague met a young Hispanic woman who worked at a bar, got her addicted to illegal narcotics, and wrecked her marriage. According to rumors, when the family discovered he was in Glenville, they paid off a notorious Central American gang to exact retribution. The sheriff requested the VC to look into this and contact the chief again. I asked, "And what did you tell your boss?" He responded thoughtfully, "I investigated everything but found nothing." Hypothetically, if I knew who this family was, I'd probably not inform the boss. The family would be accused of conspiracy to commit murder. This is a really serious charge, the legal battle against which will be costly. Perhaps the family has no involvement in this problem because it is only a rumor in the prison yard. Even if the story is true, the individual who informed the family that Teague is in Glenville is not guilty of anything. The fact that Teague is in prison is widely known. The man merely brought this to their attention. I told him that I overheard his father quoting PA's parables. He had never heard this story before and was shocked. I looked at his face to see whether he comprehended what I said. When I was certain he understood, I commented, "It's nice to know I have friends too." VK grinned warmly and rubbed my shoulder, saying, "I am glad we understand each other so well, Andy." Lay could not have selected a better man. In the weeks since I caught her, Letty and I attempted to have sex a half-dozen times. I was still upset. And I was having problems following through. This had never occurred to me before, and it left me absolutely disheartened. As soon as the time came, I became as slow as a noodle. Letty misinterpreted this as a refusal and wept uncontrollably for several hours. This did not help me much either. I decided to visit my doctor. My doctor certified me physically healthy and recommended me to a psychologist, Meadowzana. An old hippie woman, she was the psychologist he recommended. Her office is located in Matcomb. Meadow appealed to me greatly. She is down-to-earth, worldly, and approaches the problem with comedy, which I found extremely amusing. I gave her the account of what happened, using humor and irony to alleviate her anguish. She laughed in all the areas where I would laugh if someone told me this story in a similar manner. She has an amazing whole-body chuckle. She worked with me twice a week for several months to help me cope with my anger in a positive way. As I learned to regulate it properly, my functionality has returned. However, making love with Lay was sloppy and awkward. My faith in her remained damaged. I treated the symptoms but did not address the core issue. Letty softly supported me when I scheduled couples counseling with Meadow. Meadow started our counseling by asking us to discuss our aspirations. My aspirations were unexpectedly different from Letty's. I stated, my goal is to overcome my anger and feelings of betrayal. I want to reestablish our trust to where it was before I returned home. Letty responded, my goal is to figure out if I am so dang foolish. Seriously, that's what she told the consultant. When Letty said that, Meadow practically burst. She laughed so hard that she was unable to talk for about a minute. She abruptly stopped laughing, sat up, and exclaimed, "Damn it, Letty, you made me wet myself." And she dashed into the bathroom. The way it was done made both Letty and me laugh out loud. It was therapeutically beneficial. For the first time in a long while, I relaxed around Leigh, putting my hand in hers. She smiled at me for the first time in weeks. Meadow was surprisingly effective at assisting us. However, it was not easy. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been if Leigh had only gotten to Teague's hotel room for a few minutes. I often thank my lucky stars that I caught it right before leaving. For the first 3 sessions, we walked in circles. What concerned me the most was that Letty was plainly excited by the possibility of being sexually exploited by a man she disliked. The stories that sprang to me as I considered the causes for her reaction carried me to a dark place. Leigh, for her part, denied being aroused on multiple occasions. This was extremely frustrating because it was so physically visible. Meadow and I discussed the necessity of individual talks, and she was aware that this was my biggest issue. At the 4th consultation, idealist Meadow had had enough of Letty's blandishments and duped her into admitting her erection. After acknowledging this, Letty burst into tears. Meadow spent the remainder of the session researching how Letty's arousal made me feel. For the first time, I believed Letty comprehended the depth of my emotions and the self-doubt I was experiencing. She left that session with a grim desire to help me understand her behavior and reclaim my faith in myself. For the next month, sessions were limited to Leigh and me. Meadow startled me with her first question as we resumed our doubles practice. She reiterated the terms of the BET and asked whether I wanted to obtain the same offer from Letty someday. I answered by speaking directly to Letty. "I'd love to make the same bargain with you as Teague did, without the illicit stuff, of course. I wanted to try so many things with you, but you wouldn't let me. You even declined to try something you obviously enjoyed. I'd do anything to have you as my slave, and I could do anything with you. Hell, sure, all day, every day." Letty glanced at me, shocked and surprised. I questioned sarcastically, "How is it possible that you are unaware of my feelings for you?" My wife blushed bright red as she continued, "Andy, I come from a very conservative family." Letty remained mute without finishing her idea. Meadow sensed her pain and asked, "Letty, do you remember what we talked about? You must be honest and forthright. We should tell him about the phone call. He should know." I carefully waited to hear what my wife would say. She gathered her strength and began, "Shortly before my mother left us, I got home early one day because softball practice was canceled. When I returned, I overheard my mother speaking on the phone. She spoke candidly about sex. I assumed she was talking to Dad, and she was. I had never seen this side of my parents before. This both offended and pleased me. My mother left us a week later, and when I arrived home, I expected Dad to be there, but he had been called to the hospital. Because of this visit, I was the one who discovered the note she had placed on the kitchen table. The note was written to my father, but I read it. From the letter, my mother claimed that my father never supplied her with an adequate quality of living and did not please her sexually, so she is leaving to find someone who can do both. The letter included divorce papers. I only realized later that she was on the phone with the man she fled with, not her father. It was traumatic. I never got over it, and it gave me a negative perception of female sexuality. This story startled me. The fact is, Andy, I have a real powerful libido. I received it from my mother, I'm sure. Meadow forced me to complete a survey, and based on my reactions, it is at the top of my list. She turned to our consultant. What was the result? Meow responded, Leigh is more than 2 sigma above the median, 95%. Her self-rated libido is greater than 97% of all women. Letty nodded and admitted, I've been masking and hiding this side of myself from you for years, and I did this for 2 reasons. First and foremost, I was scared you would find in me a resemblance to my mother, a dissolute lady whose ambitions outweigh her duty to the family. Second, I was terrified to let the beast out of its prison. I was terrified that if I gave in to my passion, it would consume me. I suppressed it to avoid losing control, Meadow remarked calmly. After a lengthy time, you must continue, Letty. You should talk about your arousal that day. You know how much Andy was harmed during our previous group session. You must be as open as possible, Letty spoke. After I lost my last bet with Bowden, in which both illegal substances and my virtue were at issue, I expected to feel horrified and filled with terror. But it unexpectedly caught fire. I was excited all day. It had nothing to do with Bowden, he disgusted me. It was not about infidelity. I didn't want to cheat on you, and I was fully satisfied with you. What piqued my interest was the prospect of doing something I couldn't acknowledge to myself. I wanted the possibility of being forced into this. It seemed quite liberating to me. It was not because of Bowden. I'm not cheating on you. The idea is that I could let the beast out of the cage without feeling bad. I couldn't wait to see what it was like. I stared at Meadow perplexed. Is this real? Is Letty willing to be coerced into sexual actions to avoid guilt? This sounds like fiction, I said. It is real, Meadow responded in English. A promiscuous lady is someone who has a lot of sexual partners. Women with high libido struggle to balance their sexual desire with social pressure to discriminate in sexual relationships. This results in numerous behavioral patterns. First, women with high libidos frequently hide their sexuality. Second, they seek psychological justifications for their sexual partners. For example, the epidemic of intoxicated sex culture among students is one way in which women attempt to rationalize their strong libido. If they're inebriated, they can tell themselves, I'm not a promiscuous woman, I was simply inebriated. In Letty's instance, she claimed that being forced gave her a sense of freedom. She can tell herself, I am not a dissolute woman who chose. This for herself, I was pushed. So, I began snapping objects, but this is sophistry. In fact, she chose to interrupt me with a gesture of indignation, as if I were a particularly foolish pupil. Andy, you questioned if it was real, not whether it made sense or was rational. I know this sounds crazy to you, but avoiding guilt by externalizing your locus of control is a surprisingly common occurrence. It is speculated that this is one of the reasons why submissive sexual behavior appeals to a surprising proportion of the population. I thought about it and then asked, Meadow, do you believe Letty? Meadow responded, Letty and I have thoroughly discussed this issue, and I am completely convinced that she is telling the truth. Furthermore, I do not believe she is concealing any motivation other than what she stated. Unfortunately, my opinion is irrelevant. This is something you have to decide for yourself. Letty gazed at me carefully, anxiety on her face. She waited for me to say anything. I stared at Meadow, as did she, confused. I asked, did you have a question for me? Did I miss it? Meadow responded, for multiple sessions, you asked Letty to explain why she was so excited as she prepared to travel to the Hotel Teague. She simply handed it to him. Do you accept her explanation? That's all. As Dad pointed out, these were facts. Do I believe Letty and Meadow? I addressed Letty immediately. Letty, when we married, I promised you that I would be faithful for the rest of my life. No one compelled me to do this. I chose to make this vow because I loved you. You were and stay amazing, attractive, and appealing. We got a little crazy when I promised to remain faithful, but I appreciate your wish to walk down the aisle as a virgin. I am aware that I have a very high libido, and I was concerned that yours would not match mine. When I saw you let loose at times, I hoped and prayed that we'd be in sync. Allow yourself to go, have fun, greedily taste delight. I interpreted that as a hint that you might equal my sexual passion. I walked to the altar planning sexual adventures with you for the rest of my life. When we eventually made love, there were no disappointments. You weren't shy, you preferred to receive physical pleasure from me. And with each action in bed, you demonstrated that you loved me with your whole heart, body, and soul. However, throughout our marriage, you kept something from me. I didn't strive to do what I knew you wanted. You are resistant to experiments. She wouldn't allow us to progress to the next level. I couldn't understand why. This was causing me to have doubts about myself. The fact that you have a high libido does not bother me, offend me, or make me feel uneasy. It brings me delight. What irritates me is that you have a strong libido that you refuse to fully share with me. I still don't see why sex is harmful for married couples, to be honest. He is usually good. I heard your father preach on this topic before he left the ministry. He said that married couples' bodies belong to each other. I can't recall how he said it, but it was biblical. Married couples should cede control of their bodies to their husbands. They must keep each other alive so that they can resist the urge to betray their vows. Letty intervened. Corinthians, this is from Corinthians. I nodded. I accept your word for it. You know, I'm not a Bible scholar. In any event, I believe I understand what your father taught. God provided the pleasure of sex in marriage as a consolation, as long as it happens within the context of a legitimate marriage. What spouses do in bed, of their own free will, does not offend God if it is not offensive to God and provides us comfort. Why don't we do it? Help me comprehend, why do we avoid finding comfort in one another? If allowing me to make sexual decisions makes you feel less guilty, I'm more than willing to do so. I will take it, accept the blame, as I previously stated. Hell yes, all day, every day for me. There's no fear, disgust, doubt, or sex. I only ask that you be honest with me. We decided to be companions for the rest of our lives. I believe I deserve the truth from you. The expression on, let's face, reaffirmed his decision. The correct one. Passion rushed inside, igniting with a blinding flame. I looked across to Matt to see how she reacted, and the look on her face indicated that she believed I had struck the nail on the head. However, Meadow stated, Andy, you have not answered the question posed to you. Do you accept her explanation? I turned to my wife and said, Letty, in your explanation, you asked me to accept 3 things. First, admit that you had no desire, lust, or interest in having sex with Bowden. When you heard these remarks, her face tightened. I accept this wholeheartedly, I said. I believe it. Relief flooded over her face. Second, you wanted me to accept that you weren't disappointed in me, that you had no desire to cheat on me, and that you regard me as an outstanding sexual partner. Her face became tense again. I accept this wholeheartedly. I believe in it. She grinned even more broadly, her relief evident. Third, you requested me to agree that the reason you were aroused that day was because you were repressing your high libido, and the possibility of being enslaved by a man who intended to use you sexually allowed you to fulfill your libido without feeling guilty. She grinned, awaiting my response. I completely disagree with this, I said to myself. That sounds like complete nonsense from a psychopath. Let his expression show horror. She closed her eyes, and tears started streaming down her cheeks. Meadows' look was equal parts fear, panic, and disappointment. I went on, saying that agreeing with such a clear statement without any evidence would make me an idiot. What kind of a fool do you think I am? Before triggering the trap, I took time to process what had just happened. During this period, Lay and Meadow each took a long breath before saying anything. I stated that your claims can be verified. I need evidence. I need a demonstration. Show that your statement is correct. Meadow screamed out, laughing at the top of her lungs. 15 seconds after Letty did. Only after this did Letty realize what I was saying. After that, Letty and I haggled for about 30 minutes. She made counteroffers and then attempted to lower the price, and then completely implored me. I stood my ground. You are planning to give Teague 3 days. I want a full year. 365 days to do whatever I want with you. I'm at least 120 times more important to you than Bowden Teague. I believe this is sensible. In fact, I believe I am 1,200 times more important to you. So be thankful you're not requesting 10 years. In less than a year, I grossly underestimated myself, she said. But Andy, you need to be realistic, I answered. Let the whole point of this exercise is that you are attempting to persuade me that giving a guy power over your sexuality gets you on by negotiating constantly to prevent me from taking control. You are merely weakening your argument. Meadow chuckled as I said this, and I got the idea that if she had popcorn, she would be eating it right now. Letty spoke. So, what are you insisting on? Would you like me to agree to 365 days under your control? Do you promise me that after this, you will agree that I am telling the truth? Let's be quite precise. I'd like to apply inductive reasoning to check the truth of your statement. We will do numerous repeat observations under various settings in order to obtain a consistent result. Your obedience will decide how you feel about my authority in this situation. If your words are true, I expect to see 365 days of quick and full submission. Immediate and complete submission implies that you will do what I say when I say it. You are unwilling to bargain. You will not behave half-heartedly. I want you to ride or perish for a year. If you do this for a year, I will believe. She closed her mouth and lowered her jaw, not a good indication. I started to worry that I had overplayed my hand and that my tactical success here would turn into a strategic loss. She asked, "How long do I have to think about your proposal?" I replied, "I will allow you many days to think about it." Meadow requested me to spend the remainder of the session alone. Meadow smiled at me as they exited the consultant's office. At the end of the session, 3 days later, when I got home from shopping, Leigh was waiting for me at the kitchen table. She had already drunk 2 glasses of Chardonnay and was applying a bandage to the inside of her left wrist. I asked about the bandage. She peeled it off, the words "jump or die" etched neatly on her wrist in little PPE. She stated, "I want to do this for you, as far as I understand it. I am your slave, with whom you can do whatever you want for the next 365 days. I will not refuse you for any reason. If this remains within our marriage, I will ride or die. Nobody except you or me, this isn't discussed. I mentioned to you a few nights ago that this goes without saying, you're mine. I have no intention of sharing." She raised her wrist and stated, "I ride or die." I got up and followed her to the bedroom. She was quite excited. Over the next year, hardly a single day went by without sex. I made sure we did something every day, no matter how tired, frustrated, or busy we were. I still did it. She kept her vow to never deny me anything. I respected her feelings about it, which made it easier for her. We spent the first few months getting Letty adjusted to what she called full access. She was conventional and conservative, so it took her some time to relax and accept everything I wanted to attempt. It was essential to overcome psychological hurdles. When we discussed our first success, she grew hoarse from the loud moans. After discovering that such experiences were possible, she ceased suppressing her sexuality. She never held back. Within 6 months, we had completed my entire wish list. When I acknowledged this to Letty, I tried everything I could think of. She, to my astonishment, asked me to push the bounds of our ability. I returned to Meadow and asked for help in figuring out how to accomplish this. She did some research and gave me a really comprehensive list of things to try. Of them, I was unfamiliar with half. My past Google searches would make a lesbian Frenchwoman wince. She also insisted that I let Letty finish her own research. I asked Letty to look up adult websites online and send me links to stories she thought were interesting. As a result, we developed a list of 12 things to try. When Meadow gave me her list, she gave me some wise advice. Keep in mind that there are 3 lists: what excites her, what she wants to do, and what she is ready to do. She doesn't necessarily want to do something just because it makes her feel good, and even if she does, it doesn't mean she will. Are you following? Women often fantasize about various forms of sex and related experiences. Few of these women would even entertain the thought of acting in this manner. Letty's stimulation does not necessarily mean she is drawn to something. If you do decide to dive in head first, avoid staring into the abyss and trying to figure out what makes her feel attracted to you. Just take it and make her feel happy with it. I know Letty well enough to know that you are the only person she truly thinks about at the end of the day. You also ought to be aware of this. Later that week, I forced Letty to play pretend. Her response embarrassed her. She was afraid that I would think of her as a promiscuous woman who was seeking sex with other men. I informed her of Meadows' advice, and Frank told her I had no intention of looking into the abyss. She found it hard to believe me, considering what we had just gone through, but in the end, she decided to put her trust in me. I came to the realization that I wasn't jealous of this over time. Using Meadows' list made her much more forthcoming about what made her feel attracted to someone. We experimented in many ways that most couples would never do. We found some pretty unexpected twists on what she finds appealing, but overall we enjoyed it. I made the decision that we would try something different one day. Letty was ecstatic, but I didn't like it at all for almost. She was trembling with anticipation. She asked, surprised, as she stretched out on the bed, "Where does it come from?" "It's unlikely that you could locate a woman who would enjoy it as much." She wanted to laugh, but as soon as she did, her expression softened. "I never would have done this without your desire and seeing how I reacted," the woman said. "Are you understanding what I discussed in Meadows' office? I didn't have to feel bad about having fun. I think I've justified myself today. I concurred that the year was amazing. There has been a resurgence of our sexuality." Letty opened up like the first bloom on a beautiful rose. I saw her tinkering with the tattoo a lot when she was feeling insecure, drawing courage and resolve from it. She was drawn to daily sex, servitude, and sexual experiments. She had not had a single failing week all year, for the first time since we'd met. She started to feel happier, less agitated, and noticeably less nervous. She felt more confident because she knew I loved her and liked everything. Daily sex was just heavenly for me. I moved as if I possessed the planet. One of the main responsibilities of my work at the gun store is negotiating. I relaxed my efforts to come across as PA's tough businessman and started interacting with customers more casually. Customers are more likely to accept a fair deal when they perceive that I am negotiating in good faith and am not attempting to mislead them. It's true what they say, confidence facilitates negotiations. At work, I was unstoppable. Our store was doing well financially. 3 distinct offers for repurchase came from other retailers in our state. Despite their all being very profitable, I opted to stay with the company in order to support my employees. Even though I kept all of the advice to myself, some way the word got out. "Andy, I heard you turned down a buyout offer from J. Crown Tactical," County Commissioner J.D. Butler said as he entered my store one afternoon. "Could you please confirm this?" Though I knew this was true and that the amount was substantial, I couldn't bring myself to accept it. "Mr. Butler, we love this country," I said. "I don't think I can even get Leigh out of here with a crowbar. I must admit that I didn't think you would come back home when I found out you attended college in Atlanta. I assumed that, like your brother and sister, you would venture into the wilds of Atlanta. But you amazed us all by returning home and putting a strong emphasis on the district's future. Son, I'm proud of you. I wanted to talk to you honestly about the future business arrangement because of this." J.D. oversaw the acquisition and renovation of the last few establishments on the county's Main Street. Wonderful brick structures with big windows and wooden floors, the old buildings on this street transport you back to a more prosperous time. These buildings will be amazing in 100 years with a little TLC. The sous chef at a 3-star Michelin bistro in Atlanta, Tyler Jade, is a tired man of the city, and his wife is expecting a child. He made the decision to establish a farm-to-table restaurant upon returning to the county. Tyler wanted to take advantage of the growing number of day trippers from Augusta and Atlanta who are looking for a taste of rural life. Lonnie, the owner of Lonnie's Barbecue, plans to move his eatery 2 doors down from Tyler's and launch an upscale ice cream and coffee shop with his niece. The family intends to convert an outdated supermarket into a business where everything is priced at 1 cent or $2. To showcase the rifles that won the West, J.D. wanted me to move my company to the old Farmers Bank building, which was a part of Uncle Kevin's store. JD thinks that while people in the city wait for their tables, they will have something interesting and rustic to look at. Initially, I had a lot of doubts. The fact that there is no building mortgage or rent to pay is one benefit of owning a gun store. But deep down, I know that the store's biggest weakness is that it's in the middle of nowhere. I realized that we would draw in more visitors if we were in the city center with better parking. Jacob persuaded me of this idea by taking me inside the historic bank building. Its stability comes from the fact that this is an old stone structure. The store's fittings are all brass, the cash register can be used for floor sales, and the enormous storage container from the 1930s is still in excellent condition, so there is little chance of theft. Because the bank had not paid its taxes, the county had taken control of it. I can pay the outstanding taxes to buy the building. The tax will be 30% of the building's assessed value if I agree to run a store there for 10 years. I spoke with Letty, my employees, and my siblings about it, and I found nothing wrong with it. I was able to take out an early loan against my sister's future share of the family trust because she was the trust manager. I moved my store to the bank building after buying it. I never made a better business decision than I did that one. Leigh and I have made a concerted effort to be more open and truthful with one another about our mental states and experiences when we are not at home, as part of what Meadow calls trust work. We had to answer a series of questions that compelled us to reveal our secrets every evening. We learned how to talk about the things that uncomfortable us by using this list. In order to give everyone more time to spend Thanksgiving with their families, I granted everyone a day off on Black Friday. My former school friend Florence Benson stopped by to chat about school when I was by myself in the store. Famous for being a late bloomer, Florence was a slender, insecure blonde. Florence used to be my main rival for my affections. When Florence grew up, she changed into the classic, gorgeous Kate Hudson, but with a sweet smile. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Of course, she attended Carnegie Mellon to study musical theater. In her first year, she developed greatly and accomplished a lot. She had just completed a 24-month run as an understudy Glinda and then as a swing performer in the Broadway musical Wicked. She has been cast in the touring production of Wicked as Elphaba. She knew she wouldn't be able to see her family again until she started her tour, so she came home for Thanksgiving to spend time with them. I invited Florence and Letty to dinner at about 4 p.m. She politely declined, and then surprised me by proposing that we have sex. She promised no one nearby would know and that she would exercise caution. I was tempted, I'm embarrassed to say that. Florence possesses a remarkable adult physique in addition to her intelligence, cleverness, and beauty. Above all, it was very flattering that she was interested in me. Her previous boyfriend was an outfielder for the New York Yankees, so she could have dated anyone. She would always remember me because I was the only person on earth who could arouse her curiosity. It was all I could do to politely refuse. It helped that I knew I would have to respond to a question about whether or not I had been tempted that day in just a few hours. I closed the store after Florence left, drove home, and told Letty what had happened right away. Envy, rage, and frenzy were what I expected to happen. Rather, she was ecstatic about my rejection and made a valiant effort to convince me that I had made the right choice. She drained me completely this week. I was too tired to help her with her strong push to get that number to throw. Letty was ferocious and ravenous. 4 months later, Letty came home from a business trip to Atlanta. She examined the ledgers, never stayed with the external auditors, and said right away that Wade Banks, the external audit company's account manager, had come up to her. Letty views Wade as a close friend and has known him for a long time. I was well versed in him, and she had brought him up earlier. He's a recent widower and a very attractive man. Letty said that following Wade's wife's passing, she made an effort to be a friend with whom he could share his grief. Wade told her how much he loved her during their last dinner together and asked if she would be the first woman to make love to him following the death of his wife. She was genuinely tempted, she embarrassedly confessed. What piqued her interest? She saw that he was a good man and truly wanted to support him in getting better and moving on with his life. She said it required a lot of resolve to refuse, but I managed to do so. I was aware that I would have to respond to questions about whether or not I had been tempted when I got back. I was able to say no because I wasn't going to lie about it. Instead of getting angry or jealous, I decided to follow her example and give her something for choosing the right decision. I just got the better of her that week. It became easier the more we practiced being honest about challenging topics. We now know that it's better to resist temptation as a group than as individuals. We became closer than ever as she dealt with the fallout from her argument with Teague and learned to be honest. Eventually, I gave VK my father's old ski boat. His interest in it was piqued after just one encounter in June. My advice to him after the third weekend was to just leave the boat at home. To be honest, I always felt sad when I saw my father's boat, so I was relieved to get it out of my garage. VK extended a kind offer after feeling bad about using it so often. I used that money to book a second Disney honeymoon for Letty and me. Letty has been dying to visit that place. For 8 days in February, I can personally attest that this is the happiest place on earth. I'm not sure about the rest of the year. As our year came to an end, I felt thankful and sad at the same time. On our last night together, we took a plane to Atlanta, where I took her to a nice dinner while wearing my best suit and tie. Letty wore her new little black dress, which looked amazing with her red panties underneath. She'd thrown up on her new tiny black dress, which was even prettier than the one she'd destroyed waiting for coffee and dessert. She went to the bathroom after supper. I did my best to tell her when I got back how much this year meant to me and how appreciative I was that she gave it to me. She silenced me with her fingers on my lips before I could finish speaking. I had formally agreed to her previous year's explanation. To Andy, the biggest bet of my life was what you allowed yourself to do this year, she said. You can treat me badly and I won't like it. You think you were lucky, but I can genuinely say that I prevailed. My risk was well rewarded. She touched her tattoo just below the words ride or perish with her index finger. It says forever now. I could smell peach pie as she clung to me. She inquired, what would you like to bet now, so that we can continue? Hi there. Please feel free to forward these contents to your friends and family if you find them useful. In addition, as is customary, if you like this video, please click the like button to support our podcast in reaching a larger audience on YouTube, as the platform favors videos with a high number of likes. You might also think about becoming a subscriber to the channel so you can be notified whenever I post something new. YouTube will let you know as appropriate. I appreciate your help, and I hope you have an amazing day.